How are we doing? Uh-oh. Muted.
I'm doing good. Sorry, I had to find my mouse.
All right. Let's see if the chats are working. We'll try Facebook first.
There's a purple monkey on the screen.
Yeah. Hello, Facebook. Yep, there it appears there. All right. So if we try the Twitch stream.
Is that the pastor and atheist thing?
Yeah, so you see, yeah, so that one's on Facebook. And then
Not seeing it.
if we were to do Twitch, Twitch has its own. So we'll do Twitch. Hello, Twitch. And there it pops up. And then lastly, let's see if we got YouTube. YouTube. Yeah, so YouTube, we've been having a problem with YouTube lately. And I am not sure
That's
what
what
the
the
deal is.
purple monkey is.
Yeah, something went wrong. I used to be able to put in chats here. Now maybe I can do it right here and see if it does it. Test. So we got Twitch and Facebook, but again, no YouTube. So I have no idea. I have no idea how it got broken. But so for those of you who are watching the YouTube stream, sorry you can't chat in. It doesn't work. For the second week in a row because I don't know what it is. So, how's your week been? Have you been enjoying the war coverage?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me if I was enjoying the warmer temperatures.
No. Just I want to start. I want to no myrrh, just war, right?
Yeah. Still not showing up on Facebook. I have watched that night. I saw the speech, and then our power dramatically went out.
Mm.
And of course, I don't have my laptop, so everything I'm doing is on my phone right now. And so it's been a little sparse on it. Carla's keeping up with it better than I am.
Zoomed in on me.
I'm sorry. Should I zoom back out?
Yes, I had you perfect on my screen.
All right, sorry.
Because I've got you zoomed in. I have you adjusted my way, right?
Well,
I mean,
your way must be better.
We would be seeing your boogers the other way around. So, anyway.
We don't want that.
No, we don't. We don't. Yeah, so it's been fun watching, or not fun. It's not been fun. None of this has been fun. Watching the news lately.
No, and I saw this guy on today, a Republican House member, I think, who's on the Armed Services Committee or whatever it has been for a long time, and he was, all over the CNN reporter anchor who was trying to ask him legitimate questions, and he kept saying, "Well, President Trump did not say that their nuclear." He's trying to get into. He didn't, how they do that all the time. Well, he says something that clearly implies something bigger than it was, but he was very specific about what he said.
Well, the messaging coming from Trump has been pretty.
Yeah.
Well, who even knows what it is? Like I still don't know if there's for sure a ceasefire.
Right.
And I mean, he said there
what
is.
He was saying was that he said obliterated, but he was. Yeah, he said obliterated, but he was only talking about those specific sites, and he wasn't. And you're reporting that they're talking about the whole nuclear program, and what CNN is reporting is not that. They're saying the evidence right now is that those sites were not obliterated.
Right.
And
yeah, so there's
they
that
don't know
too,
that that's true yet. But no, you're saying the whole thing. No, we're not. We're not. But he doesn't want. So it's. This guy was really, hammering it home. You're just reporting the wrong stuff.
The success it was.
Yeah, and no other president would have done this.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a mess.
Yeah, and if there is a ceasefire, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I guess if you're doing a ceasefire where you started shooting first, I guess that's good, right? I mean, isn't
Yeah.
that isn't that what we're down
You
to
know,
with
I
this? Is
was,
like,
yeah, I always remembered as a kid that part of what separated us was we didn't fire on anybody that hadn't fired on us. That
yeah,
was
I
kind of
mean,
what I remember being taught,
and I think
that we only went to war defensively.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's true.
I'm not saying, that was how I understood it. Whether that's what is true, that's how I understood it.
Yeah, that what should be and what is are probably different in these regards.
Right.
Once the Truman Doctrine hit, the U.S. got a lot more aggressive. So, uh, well, we're about to talk about like the media machine and how how we kind of got. I mean, we kind of talked about this a little bit when we were talking about Christian nationalism. We did the videos with Christy Burke, I believe,
Yeah.
and but this is a little bit more in depth with like, well, maybe not in depth. This is a 20-minute video, but it sort of more talks about how things are funding. The reason why this was on my mind this week is because friend of the program, Ed, who contributes quite a bit in the chat, sent me a video of Mia Bialik, I guess is her name. Blossom, we might know her as
I am
Blossom.
Bialik.
Mayim Bialik.
I
Yeah.
know her.
I,
I
I,
know as the woman that played a character that has my dream job.
what is your dream job?
She ran a cat cafe.
Cat
Coffee
cafe.
and cats. What would be better?
Oh, okay. I didn't know that she. Yeah, I know she's really good
The
at
name of the
math.
show was Call Me Cat.
She's good at math. She's good at
She
Jeopardy, I guess.
she's a neurobiologist.
Is she a neuro? I thought she was a math person,
Sh
but maybe that. I mean, I guess a neurobiologist
No,
probably has to do a little bit of
she's a
math too.
biologist.
Okay.
Yeah, which is
Um.
ironic because that is what she played on Big Bang Theory.
Yeah. Which I've seen maybe 15 minutes of the whole thing.
Oh, you missed it all.
So Ed sent me a video with her and a guy named Coleman Hughes, who I wasn't familiar with, like right off, first name basis. I don't think I've ever seen him before. I'm sure his name has been passed around in some of the circles of people that I follow, right?
Mhm.
But like the title of the video is, and I'll put it right here, is they want us to hate how identity politics fueled racism. Like and if you were to look at the title of this, it says they want you to be racist, right? And I was
They
like,
want you to be right?
they want you to be racist, and I was trying to figure out what he could mean by that. And so first things, like, I don't know who this guy is, so I'm going to give him a quick Wikipedia. A black. Oh, no. I wasn't. I was just saying they want. Well, the headline is confusing, Ed. Yeah, I wasn't judging by the headline. I was like, this is they want us to be racist. I was like, what does that even mean? Who is the they, and who do they want to be racist? They say us, like they want to turn me into a racist. You know, like what does that even mean? So you first things first. I'm like, okay, who is this guy? So I look him up, and I find out that he is employed by a right wing think tank. Right? Are you familiar with right wing think tanks, Billy? Billy's video hasn't moved in a while. Seems like we're having trouble with him again. Uh-oh. Well, let me give him a text and just tell him. Oh, yeah, we have now lost him for sure. We might. You're getting a reboot. I'm not, and I'm as far as the guy is concerned. I'm hoping Billy gets back so we can, have his input. But his sole source of income. I'm not going to go into what his finances are and how he got to it. I can tell you how he got money from right wing think tanks, and the question is why does somebody get money from right wing think tanks? Let me give Billy a text here because we did lose him. Hmm. Okay, he's texting me back now. Mm. Well, he was texting me back and then he quit. I wonder if he had a power outage or something. He said I was not seeing your stream, and then hmm. He says he doesn't have a connection issue here, but dot dot dot. So I don't know where we're at with this. Let's see. Okay. Well, guys, I'm gonna shut down the stream, I guess, because I don't know what's I guess maybe I restart Discord. Try that way. Hello, got me? Yeah, okay. All right, so maybe we got it back. I think it was just a Discord issue. I think it was just, it must have been on my end. Discord kind of messed up. So let's see if I can.
I'm looking at the little thing on the left-hand corner bottom.
No,
It says
you're
video
yeah,
connected.
it was me. It was on my end. It was just Discord,
Wow.
and I tried to restart it, and then Discord wouldn't start. Uh, yes, there are think tanks on the left and right. We are going to discuss this, Mary. Sorry, we had to get through the technical difficulties, but now here we are. So anyway, to get back to where we were, I was discussing with you that I don't know how much you heard before it shut down. Ed had sent me a video.
Did you hear me?
Huh?
You said yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, Ed had sent me a
I
video
can send you a video.
of Blossom, Mayim Bialik,
Yeah.
and a guy named Coleman Hughes. And firstly, I decided to, I didn't really know who he was, so I wanted to get some background. I found out he was employed by a right-wing think tank, which, okay, that's, to me, that's, if you understand kind of like what the right-wing, think tank vision and, probably mission statement is for most of these things, it's about messaging, right? Whereas think tanks for left wing, they operate a little bit differently. We'll talk about that in a second. But I kind of could tell that this guy was eventually going to go into this kind of like, the people who are really suffering from racism is white people. And I knew it was going to get there. And eventually we got here right at this point right here at 22:39 of this video, where he tries to say
I
that,
can't see the video.
Oh, I need to share it again. Sorry. Yes. Because we had to restart everything. And, to me, that just, that's a pretty poor assessment for a lot of reasons. And it just go figure. This guy is a guy that the right wing think tanks would pick up and start trying to proliferate, this kind of a message. Now, a lot of times with these, kind of things, it's not that what he is saying is explicitly wrong, right? It's just to say that it's not very well thought out, and he seems to have come from a very privileged place himself. But furthermore, if we're discussing like what racism is and what just general hate is, which is something else, prejudice, then you're not talking about what a system is, right? Because racism in the United States was and is, systemic. And it's,
Right.
even if there are some like engines of the system that are not there like that used to be, there still is perpetuation, right? And then the question is, what do you do about that? So
Yeah, and that's systemic on a macro scale, and it's also systemic in a micro scale within organizations, within churches, within you name it.
So his points were kind of like, well, this all happened around 2013, 2012, and really it came more to do with like, the technology at hand. Everybody's on Facebook, and then the algorithm, right, is what takes us over from there. And I think that this is an accurate point of view that he has, that the algorithm does feed us outrage, right? So making the argument
Yes,
that
because it works.
yeah. Now, again, though, this doesn't mean that they are aiming to make people racist against white people. It's kind of a ridiculous notion. But here is
Right.
here's where
Overham doesn't care.
right, but here's where she addresses. He had previously talked about like what is old school racism, and he had talked about, but now he's going to talk about what like the new stuff is.
You talk about what neo-racism is, as you see it.
In the book, I make a distinction between what I call old school racism and neo-racism. Old school racism is exactly what it sounds like. It's, I don't want a black man marrying my daughter. I don't want my children going to school with black kids. It's, it's self-explanatory. It's a wolf in wolf's clothing. If by now you don't know that old school racism is immoral, then there's really no helping you. I make the distinction between that and what I call neo-racism. It's essentially the same thing as wokeness with respect to race.
Neo-racism is the same thing as wokeness. It's basically the same thing. Neo-racism is basically the same thing as wokeness. What?
Or social justice.
That's stupid on its head right there.
Back to race. I mean, there's many names for it. But it essentially just reverses the polarity of old school racism. It's this style of racism.
It just reverses the polarity. Now the white people are the people that are suffering from it. Are white people suffering?
I'm not suffering from
are
it.
white people suffering from racism? A system of like a prejudice system, Billy?
No.
What would be examples of like for instance, we've had one black president, right?
Yeah.
And that probably spawned a reactionary Trump presidency.
Yes, I would agree with that too. And
Right.
and if you don't believe that, look at the Tea Party.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we're going to
Why
get to the
did
Tea
the
Party
come
because
into existence?
one of his big points here is he thinks that it was just about us getting phones and getting Facebook. But I was like, and he specifically remembers 2012 and 2013. But the reality is like this stuff was boiling up way before then. I was there.
Right.
I remember when Obama got elected. I remember, right?
That's right.
Like the racism that was there. Like this is a bad faith. He's presenting a bad faith argument. He's saying what it is, and it's just not that.
That says white people are inherently evil. Whiteness is evil. Blackness, to be of color, is to be special, is to be morally superior, is basically to have an innate moral insight into right and wrong that the kind of depraved colonial white mind doesn't have. So the reason I call this neo-racism is because, I really do think it is as much racism as the old kind of racism. It's just that the targets of the racism are less sympathetic from the point of view of underdog dynamics, right? Black people are seen to be underdogs in America naturally.
Yeah, they were oppressed for their entire existence when they got over here.
400 years. It's not long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not, Ed.
This provokes sympathy when a black person is a target of racism. White people are not seen to be underdogs in America, and so there's less sympathy, definitely, certainly on the left of the political spectrum. But
anyway, we don't have to go through this entire video. I just wanted to point out like why, a right-wing think tank would be interested, why they would be interested in somebody, pointing out this point of view. And then let's talk about like why it would be a red flag in the first place if you found out they're from this. Yeah, my head's in the sand, buddy.
Yeah, he doesn't understand one of the most basic things about racism is that underdog thing he's talking about is
that's a part of it. That's the whole system. The systemic part of it is the underdog thing, that you were a minority, that group that was oppressed and enslaved, and those repercussions have rang out through history. It's a very head in the sand place to come from it any other way.
And minority, by definition, in sociological terms, does not necessarily mean a numerical minority. For instance, women
But in this case, it
outnumber
is a
men.
numerical minority for sure.
Right, but the point is, the definition of what makes somebody a minority isn't just numerical. It's how society treats them, how society is set up to work against them, also makes them minority.
Because they're not in power,
And
yeah. It's a power
white,
issue.
right, a white patriarchal system that is designed by white men isn't ready to let go of sharing the power.
All right. So anyway, I wanted to further go on. We had a little quick chit chat about this. Is like, man, you really need to like really have an idea about where this money's coming from and like what it is. So I remember a couple different videos. One by this guy.
That guy
Hmm?
is Ed saying that guy that we just saw was on?
Yeah, Coleman
Congress?
Hughes. He's a look, this guy's very. I mean, if we watch the whole video, I mean, you learn a little bit. He's from New Jersey, and he even tells you he's from a very progressive town. So that speaks to his his life experience is at least a little bit naive when it comes to like what maybe some other people have experienced, right? But it's not this is not commentary on his intelligence or what he's done or what he's written and who he's spoken to. I mean, he's a Columbia grad, and this is a smart person. This is a person that we do need to listen to him. His main premise is that we really do need to be getting back to this, like, I don't see color kind of like idea set, right? That we kind of had in the 80s. And he even cites like, he'll even cite that, there wasn't really any race problems up until 2012, which I just completely disagree with.
Yeah, I went to seminary in the 90s, 80s and 90s, and I was in Atlanta. I guarantee you racism on both the old school racism was prevalent, and also racism that was more not neo racism like
Right.
he's saying, but
Well, no, his racism is racism against white people. Like that's what he's saying is neo racism.
Yeah. I mean, I had friends in seminary who were of other besides me in Atlanta at a prestigious university, Emory University, and some of them, just like some of the other, all of the students. There were some of us that were, scraping by to live on $500 a month, and there were others who were, came from pretty good money in their family.
What do you mean no?
And
hold on, Ed. This is exactly how Ed goes though. He's like, I went to a 50-50 high school and we had no race issues. What do you mean? Do you mean like
Ed, ask the black folks?
Yeah, like that. Every time I've done this experiment, and when I ask, black folks, like how their experience was different than mine, I get, the real answer. But what Coleman Hughes will tell you Coleman Hughes will tell you that it's baked in to feel bad about yourself, because the racism tells you to feel bad about yourself.
Yeah, and see, that's the whole argument that's been selling to the right wing, especially, is that being aware of slavery, being aware of the atrocities that we as a nation have done to people, Japanese internment camps, the Chinese laborers in California early on with the railroad stuff, and slaves and slavery, that should make you feel bad about who you are now, if you're a white man or a white woman even. But that's not what it's about. It's about recognizing where we are as a nation, that we are an experiment in some ways still, and that the language of our forefathers is, and it was forefathers obviously, was in order to form a more perfect union. But then there's also the idea that we're moving, that there's always progress to be made, that there's more to do. That's why they made the Constitution adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
So Ed asks, if one is taught they are a victim, is it surprising for them to grow up and believe they are a victim? So I understand this framework, right? I understand the framework of this idea, but it just completely leaves out the actual victims. So, what are we talking about here? we can go into race relations in the United States and talk about victimhood, who the actual victims of oppression were.
But who's claiming to be the victim right now?
He's claiming,
that's the
Coleman
thing.
Hughes
Who is-
claims that right now it's white folk who are victimized by racism.
You and I are the victim.
Yeah, we're the victims, and so is Ed.
And the orange one is a victim. He's always a
Yeah.
victim.
Well, but this is a thing.
Oh, poor me!
But this is a thing that sells, and this is why right-wing propaganda think tanks will message this out in a way that they can, that's digestible, right? So anyway, let's talk about the money. Let's talk about the money of it.
Influence. It's a disease that killed Spaniards in the 20s. Nope, it's something else. Google defines influence as a long sentence you already basically know. But what you might not know is exactly how much effort some people go through to exert it, or how much money they spend. And telling you about these two things is really all this video is about. Because we all know the wealthy in this country have a lot of influence over our politics and our culture, and also everything left after that. So it's not like a video about that would be exposing some well-kept secret or anything. But what this video can do is give you an idea of scale. We've all heard the so-and-so spent $10 billion this election stat and thought, that sucks. But hardly anyone has seen diagrams like this, or like this, or like this, about the networks of influence that those election stats don't capture. And that's a shame. Because when you go past the big number and get into the details of how influence is actually carried out and where the money goes, there's a lot more to it than most people realize. This right here is a really, really good visual representation of the wealthy's areas of influence, and I made it myself and I got very positive feedback on it. And today, we're gonna go over it and fill stuff in using just two families, the Kochs and the Wilkses. We could do more, but you'll see why just two is more than enough in a sec. All we're gonna do this video
I do have
is list
other
their
videos
different
of
methods
others.
influence, how much they're spending, and its effects. And that's it. Because honestly, I don't need to do anything else to make my point. The facts speak for themselves once I speak to them. Let's start with the Wilkses. This part of the video overlaps a bit with what my buddy Ugopnik did a few months ago, so if you want a more detailed look, go check out his video right here. Anyway, the Wilkses are two brothers with some very far-right politics, who made their billions in the fracking industry. So far so good. These guys could have been happy just casually destroying the place I live, Earth. And you probably would have never heard their name. But they cleverly realized they could use that money from fracking to destroy the other place I live, my brain. Because if you've never heard of the Wilkses before now, you've certainly heard of the online media industries that they fund, PragerU and the Daily Wire.
You're familiar with PragerU and the Daily Wire, Billy?
Only the Daily Wire. I've only heard the Daily Wire.
Okay. PragerU is Dennis Prager, and let's see, maybe we should pull up some PragerU. Let's see. Just so we can get an idea of the different types of videos that old PragerU does. All right, so I already did that, Ed. We'll take a quick look at that in a second. PragerU.
I was sent to the U.S. by.
So, I mean, this is really, like what is the woke right? I mean, like it's just real. It's just right wing propaganda to the nth degree, if you want to be honest. Like it's junk, right? But like these are massively funded, right? So real quickly, let's just pull that up real quick. I did do a quick co-pilot just so we could talk about the funding and how left and right wing think tanks work. All right, so I was curious about that. About the left leaning. I was like, so what? Who's better funded, right? And actually, as it turns out, if we're just talking about like local donors and little stuff, the left is more funded. But what's not considered in this is the dark money, right? And this is where you get into these like groups that the Kochs and the Wilks put heavy money into, among with other right-wing billionaires, and it's more about a media messaging type situation, right? I even asked by the end of it said, while the left may dominate in total nonprofit funding, the right has historically excelled at strategic long-term investment and ideological influence, especially in areas like judicial appointments, educational reform, and deregulation. And I said, so my next question was simply, are you implying that right-wing think tanks are more used for messaging and influence compared to left-wing think tanks? And then, of course, that's a sharp read, Luke. And yes, there's compelling case to be made that right-wing think tanks have historically leaned more heavily into strategic messaging and influence operations, especially in cultural and media arenas. So, I mean, there's a bigger system at play here on the right wing. It's just is what it is.
In 2013, the Wilkses dumped
Oh,
over
and
$6.5 million
What's that, Billy?
into
What's that, Billy?
It includes buying up local television station. It includes buying up local television stations.
Sure, yeah, the Sinclair
not
Group.
hearing me?
I don't think the Sinclair Group's mentioned in this, but that's another one.
Sinclair Group.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I mean, like,
Fox, and they bought up local stations so they could even work in that arena.
I tell you what, Ed, go ahead and pull up your left-wing think tank propaganda machine. Just go ahead and show us where the money comes from in the same way that this is about to.
PragerU. And in 2015, they funded the creation of the Daily Wire with $4.7 million in seed money. Let me tell you right now, nobody making socialist content has ever gotten that kind of seed money to do something similar. But we'll get back to that later.
What matters right now is what PragerU and the Daily Wire do with all that money. If, like me, you haven't checked in a while, get ready. They push the LGBT grooming narrative and call for increased state violence against those in the queer community. They've said the gay community was, quote, a hell of a lot better off when they were oppressed by the heterosexual monogamists than when they're allied with trans activists, repeating the myth that the biggest threat to queer people is other queer people, not far-right pundits literally calling for them to be imprisoned and executed. They've claimed the 2020 election was fraudulent. No surprises there. They have segments talking about how they wish oh so badly that they could say the N-word, and that shopping at Target makes you, quote, gay and a pervert. That one's new. And they're all for book bans and book burnings because the Bible supposedly says that's okay. That climate change is a hoax, or the science just isn't in yet, so don't do anything. Wonder if the fracking billionaires like that one. And they've recently also casually dropped that they
That's
believe
Dennis
women
Prager right
are,
there.
quote, disproportionately wrecking the West. And I'm gonna
women, you're disproportionately wrecking the West.
Yeah,
I mean, like,
it is about maintaining
so what's the
it's
left
about
wing
maintaining
doing?
the white patriarchy.
But what is the left wing doing comparatively? Seriously. Oh, it's
Yeah,
about you know what it's about.
No,
We're crafting images of on the left wing for whitey hate is what it is.
yeah.
stop
Well,
here because
and
one, all these
Oh, go
examples
ahead.
are
yeah,
You were saying?
I just Ed was trying to make this point about people say ask the black people, but then when the black voices don't say something that's different than the narrative, I was telling him to ask the black people in his school. One of the things I've been experiencing here in Bluefield, where there is a much bigger diversity of race than most of the places I've lived, except maybe Chattanooga, is that, so for some reason the conversation came up not too long, right after I got here, in one of the Sunday school classes, talking about desegregation. So we're talking about the 60s now. And the people in the class was, here it was not a problem at all. It was fine. It was no big deal. Things went so smoothly. There was never a problem. To which the one black person in the room said, that's not how I experienced it. And how I experienced it was this. My brother, her brother, was one of the first students, and notice it was black students going to the white school. It wasn't white students going to a black school or going to a neutral school or anything like that. Her brother was given the option the first year that if he wanted to go to the white school, he could do that. And he did, but he got beat up every week. Her experience was there were problems. And I think sometimes we want to project onto people in all kinds of situations, well, this is how I experienced it, so that's how they must have experienced it. I went to Carnes High School. We didn't have a race problem because there were very few people that were of any other race besides white. We had Indian, as in the country of India person, who was a very good friend of mine, and a white, white predominance in there that was, 99% of the population was white. And I can't understand, I could never fully grasp personally how the few students of race beyond white experienced going to that school. They might have had a wonderful time.
But it's beyond just how somebody experiences, like how their schooling was, right, at a public school.
That's right.
That stuff there.
Yeah, that's just an example.
If we're talking about, see, the problem is that we were talking about like big systems, right? And there are going to be minorities that, I don't know, rise out of their station, or as it was, right, or that they were what they originally were, right? But the reality is that black people have been oppressed and they have less wealth, and that means a lot. Period.
Right.
Most of black folk, they grow up in a different economic, reality than most white folk. And that's not to say there isn't poor white folk,
Correct. I had a lawyer in one of my churches who served in. I had a lawyer in one of my churches who served in a predominant, 99 point, I forget what the number was. I checked it because I moved to that county. The population was over 99.5% white. And he served as a lawyer there in the town, the big town in there. And this was during the first Orange Man's administration. And he was making the point during the George Floyd, that during that conversation, I was noticing a lot of folks who, especially black folks, who were just saying, "I'm exhausted," and he and I were having a conversation, and this is a liberal guy. He's not a conservative by any stretch. He was saying though. But what people need to understand that is a lot of what they're saying, a lot of what the folks are saying that is happening to black folks in cities and around the country, he's not denying the treatment of black folks from the police, for instance. He was saying that same thing is happening to rural white poor folks, because when they get pulled over, they're getting pulled over because their car's a piece of crap, and they get pulled over for the same thing that a person of some means, middle class, whatever. And he said, as a lawyer, he was getting those calls, and they, unless they had somebody coming to the bat for them, they ended up with all the same problems. They ended up with the fines and all that just piling up. They ended up with the same difficulties. So it's a valid point to say the kinds of things we see people talking about when we talk about systemic racism also happen outside of race. But it's not a valid point to say that white people, that there is this, quote, reverse racism. That is, yes, there are certainly black folks who don't like white folks, and there's white folks who don't like black folks, and you name any other race. Right now, the target seems to be Latin folks.
I mean, those are the ones who are getting the real oppression right now.
That's right.
The West. And I'm going to stop here because, one, all these examples are from just 1 month, May 2023 or thereabouts, and two, you get the idea.
These online media outlets funded and owned by the Wilkses are broadcasting some of the most untrue, hateful, and oftentimes outright fascist rhetoric. And I'm using that word correctly, you can fight me in the comments. And they're doing so to audiences that are not just massive, but can actually rival more established media. You've seen the obscene subscriber counts of channels like PragerU and Ben Shapiro, but that's only giving you a small idea of these institutions' reach. On Facebook, for example, the Daily Wire often finds a larger audience than the New York Times, the Washington Post, NBC News, and CNN combined, according to this NPR article from 2021.
And this just speaks to, add that with Fox and the right-wing media machine. They always say it's the left-wing media that's the one that's putting out the propaganda. But no, it's the right wing. They've got more of it, and they're doing it better, and they're lying more.
Not only do these online media have a huge role in shaping the national dialogue by nurturing and then feeding moral panics up to larger institutions like Fox, who will then encourage far-right vigilantes into acts of stochastic terrorism, these online personalities' influence helps them shape actual real-life laws. Recently, for example, the Daily Wire's Matt Walsh was a big part of the reason that Bill HB 1 passed in Florida, a bill banning gender-affirming healthcare for those under 18. So, money well spent for the Wilkses. But not just by the Wilkses. Although the Kochs aren't direct investors in either PragerU or the Daily Wire based on what we could find online, one of the Kochs' nonprofits, Americans for Prosperity, and don't worry, we'll get back to them later, have campaigned on behalf of Ron DeSantis, and he gave over $100,000 to the Daily Wire last year. But that's obviously not all. Prominent Daily Wire figures like Ben Shapiro have received speaking fees from the Koch-funded Young America's Foundation and also Koch-funded Turning Point USA. You can already kind of see the network of mutual support appearing here, but we're not done yet. What about more traditional media, like the press? Well, these conservative infinite money glitches are there too. For example, Charles Koch has funded Tucker Carlson's media company, The Daily Caller. You might not have heard about The Caller before, but in 2017, it got $980,000 from a combination of funds from the creatively named Charles Koch Institute and the Charles Koch Foundation.
And before you get worried, let me reassure you. They do the exact same thing as the Daily Wire and PragerU, just mostly in article format. Their tabloid-style articles are always some variant of, "The barbarians are at the border. It's time to freak out. Queer people are groomers. Trump did nothing wrong." And given that last headline, it probably won't surprise you to find out that on top of the nearly $1 million from Charles Koch, $150,000 of the Daily Caller's funding came from the Trump campaign. And together, those two investments made up over 97% of the Daily Caller's revenue that year. In other words, Carlson's paper simply wouldn't
97%.
exist without the Kochs and Trump money. And it's pretty obvious what kind of messages that money is buying and spreading.
But even though Carlson is a celebrity, the Daily Caller really isn't. Even with $1 million in a single year, it's a relatively fringe media outlet catering to an audience already convinced of some pretty extreme far-right politics. You probably hadn't heard of it before this video, but what you definitely have heard of is The Atlantic. And the Kochs are there too.
Which normally
We've
you
now
would say
entered
is a
into the
pretty
real big boy press world,
left-
by the way. This is a major,
left-leaning side.
generally well-respected press outlet, and, well,
It was.
some of their journalists have either gotten cash prizes for the Koch brothers' Reason Foundation, or are themselves heads of Koch-funded organizations like FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression. And what kinds of articles do these Koch-affiliated journalists write in The Atlantic? As you might expect, given everything else in this video, they talk about how free speech is under threat and you can't say anything anymore. While, getting paid quite a bit to say exactly that in a major magazine. And because this really is quite a tight-knit group, in the process of writing these articles, they happen to stumble into defending guys like Jordan Peterson, a guy who really can't say anything because of the darn woke mob.
Up yours, woke moralists.
That's his-
We'll see who cancels who.
That's his classic one. Up yours, woke moralist. We talked about a little bit about Jordan Peterson before.
Yeah, I remember that.
But there for a while, he was like, I don't know, maybe sort of unintentionally doing the right-wing think tank stuff. And they found a champion here, and then they put him in front of a bunch of people, and he quit his psychology job, teaching job, and now he's mad about it, I think. I don't know. Recently, he was on a quote-unquote debate on one of those Jubilee things where you debate like 20 different people, and it didn't go very well for him. So he might be on the outs, if we're being honest.
Right.
But back then he was very much a champion for this kind of thought.
Like with a lot of other conservative ventures in the free speech circles, this strategy funnels a mainstream audience, in this case that of a pretty legitimate magazine, to a climate change denier and well-known transphobe also getting his own cut of the Koch fund by painting him as a victim. Truly, no one could have seen this coming.
It's part of their thing
And
to
I
be a
chose to
victim.
talk about The Atlantic here because it bridges the gap to the whole Daily Wire crowd quite nicely. But The Atlantic is far from the only press outlet the Kochs are putting money into. There are plenty of outlets and organizations getting the attention of the billionaire brothers. Another big one on the list, for example, is Time Inc., which the Kochs put $650 million into the purchase of in 2017. To give you an idea, Time Inc. used to own magazines like Time, of course, but also Fortune, People, Sports Illustrated, Essence, and the list keeps on going. Just to kind of recap, because I've been going pretty quickly here, right now, looking at only 2 families and in only 2 sectors of influence, online video and traditional media, we already have so much to go off of. A ton of money and huge audiences to match. The Kochs and the Wilkses have, thus far in the video, already spent hundreds of millions to either completely command or have a pretty direct impact on the editorial line of massive media organizations reaching.
So I guess, for me, it's just like, show me where this is done on the left in the same capacity. And I had another video prepared by Leisha Miller who talked about how this initiative really started, much, much longer ago. Right. And we talked a little bit about it when we were doing the Christian nationalism stuff, these media networks. And then it leads into like Rush Limbaugh. Right. And,
And
the
Roger
80s and
Ailes.
90s. Well, then
Roger Ailes was.
Well, Fox News, Rupert Murdoch, they get their thing going. And then Roger Ailes, they join forces. And there's a whole lot more to be talked about with, the fairness doctrine and how Ronald Reagan did some screwy things, that kind of. Now, I will say this. I don't think it's necessarily wrong for channels to be able to say whatever they want to say. Right? The problem is, Fox News came in with the same attitude as Rush Limbaugh, and he realized it was entertainment. But the thing is that it's just interchangeable with some people for news. So you've put in this yeah.
And Rush Limbaugh was early on saying things like he would go on a journalist panel. And then when they challenged him on his lack of journalism, he'd say, "Oh, well, I'm not a journalist. I'm an entertainer." But then he would claim to be a journalist when it was convenient. and he was back and forth on that. Fox did the same thing as a network. They said, "Oh well, these people are journalists and these people are
Entertainment.
entertainers," and the folks who are entertainers are the predominant thing that's on their network. Some of that is true. I mean, that is true also, though, on CNN.
I mean, it's true. Yeah, it's true on CNN and MSNBC. I mean, it's the model now, right? For
Right,
those.
it is. We
I mean,
no longer get news. You get
well, and part of it is because
conversation.
CNN did its thing, right? It was the first 24
Right.
hours news network. Now, I remember when
Correct.
CNN first came out, it was very much Gulf War stuff. It was very compelling. We were
Yeah.
all watching CNN.
Bernard Shaw.
Yeah, Bernard Shaw. Yeah. He'd be there and he'd be, there's fighting going on. He's in the hotel room or whatever and taking
Well,
pictures of bullets.
Bernard
flying
Shaw
through
and
Yeah.
Wolf Blitzer were the storytellers of that war.
Yeah, the first Gulf War, the
But
HW one.
so with the media, the concept of right and left, and that it made good television to have somebody on the far right and somebody on the far left have a conversation and fight it out, goes all the way back to the 60s with Point Counterpoint or whatever the show was that was on one of the 3 networks that we had in the late 60s and the early 70s. And that I think CNN was the one that one of them brought it back at some point, that very same show. But you had those shows that their whole purpose was to just have quote debate, but it was really, we want these people to yell and scream at each other because that's good television.
Well, I mean, and this is to Coleman Yu's point that it is part of the outrage cycle. Like that's very much a part of it, right? The algorithmic outrage cycle that was especially more prevalent, probably in, I don't know, it was probably just unintended consequences, with Facebook. They didn't realize what they were doing when they're putting people together like this.
Yeah. Well, and also going back to the Point Counterpoint or whatever the other show was, there was another show, I can't remember the name of it now, but that whole idea that everything was black and white, that there's only 2 sides to every story and there's no conversation in between, was a part of media's failure because it worked, because it was entertaining. People would watch the news. When Walter Cronkite was on, CBS didn't see the news. They didn't see the news as a money-making thing. That they saw that as a public service that they did. It wasn't a way to
Yeah, but
fund
it
the
had
network.
to have come. It had to have come to the news. But they had to know. They
Right,
had to
but
know that they're still selling ads.
but yes, but they weren't the moneymaker juggernaut that they are now for the networks. For the networks and for, of course, CNN is all about the news, and so is Fox and all that. But for ABC, NBC, CBS, that they didn't become the news section did not become the funding part that allowed them to do all the entertaining stuff outside of news until in the 70s and 80s.
Right. Yeah, Ed mentions Crossfire.
Crossfire, yeah, that's it,
Yeah,
Ed.
yeah. It was Tucker Carlson and I remember Jon Stewart was
Yeah,
on it, but I think they
yeah,
even did
but
what was it, Janine Garoppolo or something for a while. I
yeah,
don't
but
know.
this goes back to black and white television. That show,
Yeah.
and
Millions
so
of
and so on the right and so on the left.
Right.
people in the US. These organizations then use their funds to spread homophobic, transphobic, and climate skeptic rhetoric, or will serve as a bridge to other figures receiving conservative funding like Jordan Peterson, who will make these statements more aggressively than better respected press can afford to. And by now, you might be wondering how this all happens. I've been using the Kochs or the Wilkses as shorthand, but it's probably pretty obvious that they're not out there doing all these deals themselves. So, what's going on? This last column is kind of a grab bag. Throughout this video, you've heard me bring up a number of different organizations. Americans for Prosperity, the Reason Foundation, the Charles Koch Foundation and Institute, FIRE, and so on. All of these organizations' funding can be traced back to a couple sources. Another set of organizations with names like Stand Together, Donors Trust, TC4 Trust, or Americans for Prosperity. These are all pretty much interchangeable organizations that are most visibly funded by the Kochs, but usually also get donations from hundreds of other wealthy conservatives and so-called free market advocates. Take Stand Together as a quick example. It's one of these centers from which a lot of the influence money flows down to the smaller orgs that have come up throughout the last 15 minutes. On their website, Stand Together describes themselves as a, quote, philanthropic community, but that's a little vague. On their tax documents, they're a little more explicit. Stand Together's mission, in their own words, is to, quote, advance its members' common business interest by advancing the principles of free markets and a free society. You get the idea. Philanthropy, business owners making more money. Potato, potato.
Same thing, isn't it? Ed, I would disagree that it was just they did so well because it was an alternative POV. That's
agree.
obviously part of it, but the reality is they found spaces that the left just didn't go at first, and it was brilliant.
Yeah, and I would add that I think that's a false narrative to say that. Not what you said, but the statement Ed makes, because I hear it all the time, that the alternative point of view was not being heard.
The alternative point of view,
What-
when you're talking about conservatism, is the status quo.
That's exactly right. And also the other part of that is, if the alternative point of view is that the media is not covering something that they've investigated and found no validity to, and they're not covering it because you think they ought to be covering it, that doesn't exist. For instance, Pizzagate. The whole thing. Some guy came to me and said, well, the guy in one of my churches, he was saying, well, they're not covering this story anywhere. And so I went and looked at it. I went and investigated it. I looked at a bunch of different sites. I went to CNN.
When did you do this?
Back before the guy came and attacked the pizza place in DC.
Oh, this was before the attack. So you heard about
Before the attack. Yes. So this guy was telling me, oh, they're not covering it. So I went and looked. All of the sites of legitimate news sources were saying, we have investigated this. It isn't true. They ended the story because it wasn't true. But the alternative point of view wasn't being shared, was an argument that was being made as to why some places should cover it. Even Fox News said, this isn't really true. But they held on to it because it drew in people. So if they're not covering your conspiracy theory, that doesn't mean that the alternative point of view is not being true. Alternative point of view shouldn't be that the news media promotes lies. It should be that, yes, there are people that feel this way or this way about things. There are, scientists that feel this way, that believe this based on their data, and there's other data that shows something. But that's not, science is what it is. Climate deniers, for instance, are constantly claiming, well, the media is all out to try to prove their agenda. I have this friend that keeps posting when it's hot out, he'll say, but look, it was hotter in this town back in 1963 or 1988 or 1922 or whatever. And I'm like, you understand the difference in weather and climate, right? Please. So every time he posts it, I put that back on there. And it's the science is clear on this, and it's like saying evolution doesn't exist, that we need to cover evolution as use what was that, creationism when you teach creationism in science classes in school, but creationism isn't science.
well, so we could
Evolution,
we could take like an alternative point of view. We could go the pastor and atheist route here and say, that from the conservative side, conservatively, they want to keep more religion in the schools here in the U.S., right? They want, like more religious stuff as an alternative point of view, right? And they in fact do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you as
Well-
a pastor, I mean, the kind of stuff that typically the conservatives are like putting out there are of the evangelical variety of, you know.
So yeah, I was
thought.
going to just say this. So as a pastor in the mainline denomination, I assure you the alternative point of view of the Christian views of things is not being presented on any news. When they hear Christian, they hear Christian right. They
Mhm.
don't ever, rarely ever have a conversation where there is somebody from the Christian left or even sometimes the Christian middle. There was a
Sure, let's. It's correct. You know, he was using a conspiracy theory example, but we could just simply talk about prayer in school, right? In public schools,
that's right.
we don't have to go.
So CNN was doing it, and I don't remember who the person was moderating this one time, and on they did a thing on abortion. This was long before, and so on one side they brought on the table Al Sharpton and the guy from Sojourners, whose name has suddenly escaped me, and then they had on the right hand side the guy who at the time was the head of the Southern Baptist Convention, and I think it was Jerry Falwell. And the moderator of the conversation was expecting there to be two sides, black and white. But Jim Wallace, who was the Sojourners guy, said, let's talk about what we do agree on instead of just fighting back and forth about what we don't agree on. And, you know, we don't have those conversations, and news media rarely has those conversations either. But yes, the conspiracy theories are a part of what's being promoted on these networks that he's just been describing. So that is legitimate. Secondly, I am one of those ones, as I said earlier, as a liberal Christian, that my voice as a liberal Christian isn't heard as an alternative point of view to the far right. You know, I don't believe that people should be wrapping the cross.
I would
in a
say your
flag.
message, the way is pretty drowned out comparatively.
Yes,
in this
absolutely.
part of the world,
And especially in this part of the world. Yes.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
have to be careful about saying it.
Yeah, because you don't want to step on toes.
Or
Right.
get shot.
Or that too, yeah.
And this goes for most of these organizations, which are almost all nonprofits that, quote, do virtually nothing but pass grants through to other politically active 501c4 organizations. So what else do they do when they move these funds around if it's not to either of the other two media categories? Well, for starters, they'll fund AstroTurf groups like Speech First, a student group, quote, defending free speech on college campuses, that happens to get funding and professional leadership money up the chain from Donors Trust. Or, still on college campuses, Koch-led funds will be directed at academic departments. To take just one example, because there are a lot of these, Koch funded
I always think when they say it's like, they always name it with like defending free speech, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But it's also always ends up being like, we want to put prayer back in school.
organizations
Right,
will
or-
finance research
or we
centers
wanna-
like the Mercatus.
You know, we want to defend free speech, but we're going to make sure that any agency in the government doesn't use climate change, doesn't use race,
Oh, yeah.
doesn't use diversity.
Listen,
Can't say those words.
I would stand with the people that say both the left wing and the right wing of the U.S. American government do their own set of censoring, right?
Sure, I agree with that.
But at the same time, it's just always funny because it does seem like to me like it's the right wing groups that are like, we're the defenders of free speech. I'm like, no, you're not. you're the book burners, you know.
Yeah, you can't claim free speech if you're spending all your time trying to ban books.
Because there are a lot of these, Koch-funded organizations will finance research centers like the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, giving their organizations oversight over faculty hiring decisions and even some student admissions, according to this article in the New York Times. What else? Of course, I couldn't make this video without acknowledging the dozens of think tanks propped up in all 50 states which got a combined $83 million from Koch-funded orgs and their allies in 2011. Important names include the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, and the Manhattan Institute. You'll remember the Heritage Foundation from every piece of climate change denial research ever, the Cato Institute for also denying climate change, and the Manhattan Institute for being the place where the critical race theory moral panic began. But the story doesn't end there.
And it really was.
These
You can
think tanks,
link it back to Chris
alongside a number
Rufo.
of the other organizations in what has been called the Kochtopus, are deeply involved in yet another type of influence, lobbying, which they do at every level of the American government. Through the Americans for Prosperity group in particular, the Kochs and their fossil fuel allies have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on attack ads against Democratic candidates, most visibly against Obama in 2012. They have also poured a lot of money into the campaign funds of conservatives at the far right of the Republican Party, after failing to successfully prop up the Tea Party in order to push Republicans closer to the extreme. You might say they succeeded. And there is so much more. From the Mont Pelerin Society to the NRA to countless hundreds of other student groups, politicians, media organizations, nonprofits, there is truly no limit to how much time you can spend hopping from one organization to another, just following the rabbit hole of funding diagrams down to groups in your state, in your city, where you went to college. I can't do this justice. I mean, I've given you the diagrams, I've given you examples, I've given you lists to try to fill this all out, but there's just so much more that I couldn't fit into this video. Anti-Muslim, anti-LGBT groups, just remembered. There. Between 2014 and 2018.
What's bad faith? I mean, should we do the same? Should the Bible be applied with the same level of scrutiny, Billy, in public libraries? Like, to a book that might have like a gay relationship or something like that, like say.
I can't even understand where that is some real serious spin is what I'm saying. It isn't about finite space, Ed, and you know darn well it's not. It is about making sure that voices and certain people are pushed aside. And yes, they are banning books. They are taking books out of libraries so that it's not available for kids to have access to them. That is what book banning is. Yes, the federal government is not saying you can't publish that book. They're saying you just can't make access to that book ever available. That's bad faith. To try to spin that and say that it's just about finite space is just atrocious spin.
Donors Trust and Donors Capital Fund gave, quote, $13 million to organizations that profess anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant, or anti-LGBTQ sentiments, including more than $2.7 million to nonprofits considered hate groups by SPLC. You're just going to have to trust me that what I've talked about represents maybe, and this is admittedly just a guess, 5% of what these two families are out there doing. And this is what I want to end the video on. There are a lot of people, and a lot of them billionaires, contributing to the various organizations I've mentioned who also have organizations of their own, who have companies that advertise in hundreds of media outlets, who have charitable donations going to university econ departments, and who have nonprofit AstroTurf groups staging protests near you. It's simply impossible for me or for anyone to catalog it, and even more difficult for the anti-capitalist left to match this kind of influence. This is only something that billionaires can do, and billionaires tend to like being billionaires. So yes, I know that Democrats...
True or false, libraries have finite space. True. True or false, librarians should be able to pick what goes in their libraries.
Librarians shouldn't be put in jail for putting stuff you disagree with in there. Yes, there are laws being passed in certain areas of the country right now that are targeting librarians to put them in jail. I have friends who are school teachers, and they have to have, they had to just close their library in their classroom because they weren't allowed to have certain books because it had to be reviewed by somebody in the government to tell them what they could and could not have. That is book banning. It wasn't that about finite space. If it was about finite space and then you ask the teacher and you say, do you have room for the books you have? Good. That's as good a spin as the guy with the money saying he has 20 houses, but they're not his, God owns them. That's the same kind of argument there. Nobody's arguing that they don't have finite space. I'm saying finite space is not the argument they're arguing. Nobody is saying, oh, we've got to get all the book, because if that was the case, you'd say, how about we just don't have as many copies of some of the books we have? Or how about we take care of other books? It's a particular set of books they're taking out. And if you don't see that, you're not paying attention.
Is the Bible inappropriate for children?
I think that the Bible is not inappropriate for children, but I also say that there are a lot of things in the Bible that children will not understand or even grasp or have any chance of understanding. And the same is true for the Quran and other religious books.
But I'm just saying, like, the Bible goes through some pretty heavy themes or some pretty heavy stuff in there.
And there's some awful
if it
things
can
in
be
there.
allowed into a public library, a school library, public school library, wouldn't it make sense
Yes,
if
there is incest, murder, sacrifice.
Yeah, I'm saying it's like all bets are off if you're going to put the Bible in, right?
Right. And yeah, all of those things. I just book banning for the sake of trying to control people's thoughts and not allow them to have access to stuff is what brings down society.
Well, and I just think you got to trust your librarians, your school librarians in this case.
Yeah. And the parents need to be, okay, what are my kids reading?
Right.
And say, I
Parents
don't
need to
want
be
my
involved.
kid reading that. They can say, I don't want my kid reading that. That's up to the parents to ban that. But they can't say, I don't want your kid reading that.
Right.
Have their own mega donors and their own NGOs and astroturf groups. But the left doesn't. Not with this kind of scale. There aren't billionaires willing to fund a network this powerful that would advocate for their abolition. And as a fun exercise to close out the video, let me give you an idea of what it would take to try and match what the right has without being a capitalist billionaire. What you're going to want to do is take your salary and set it all aside. Don't spend any money whatsoever. Do that for 10 years. Now find a way to multiply that by 100. Either wait 90 more years or maybe invest in stocks or something. I don't know. Multiply it by 100 somehow. If my math is right, you should now have roughly $56 million set aside. That's good. That's great. I'm really proud of you. You're 0.1% of the way there. One of the things right-wing media does really well is establishing life or death stakes. It's us versus the mainstream media, us versus the groomers, the migrants, the far-left communist Democrats, whatever the hot-button issue of the week is. Let me show you what I mean. Here we have 3 examples of right-wing coverage of the same story.
Well, we're going to do the Old Ground News ad, I guess. We're going to try to get through that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see.
Crazy, and that no real American cares about this climate is real. And this is something I get asked about a lot. How do I help parents or friends break out of their little propaganda bubble? It's great to analyze an event like this, examining wording to look for bias and determining who's behind each outlet, but that's a lot of work,
Ground
and
News.
tedious research required. Now, full disclosure, as a socialist, I obviously disagree with
By the way,
placement
this is
of some of
obviously a
these outlets.
socialist channel.
For
He's
example, I
putting
don't
up
think
Karl
CNN
Marx
should be placed as
quotes.
far left as it is. But honestly, this might be a good thing when trying to educate your friends and family. If you come at them with, well, actually, CNN is a right-wing network, they're not going to take you seriously. Ground News is the perfect first baby step towards
But it
media
is sort
literacy.
of.
If you're
CNN
looking
is
for
sort
a way
of
to
a
give your friends and
right-wing.
family
I mean,
a
it
great
just
set
kinda
of
sits in
tools
the
to
middle of
understand
American
media
politics
bias,
in a lot of
who it
ways.
serves, and how to spot it.
It's a
I
left-wing
highly
version of
recommend you check out
right-wing,
Ground News
or
at
it's a
the link
right-wing
below.
version of
They're currently
left-wingism, I
offering a
guess.
30% discount for their Vantage subscription to all Second Thought viewers, which you can only redeem at ground.news/secondthought. So be sure to follow that link. Give it a shot. I promise it'll make your life a whole lot easier.
Ed, did you not find the like when we're talking about the Bible being in school libraries, should the Bible be in school libraries? And Billy's like, yeah, the Bible can be in school libraries, right? So what does that
No,
open
that
the?
wasn't the question you asked me.
Well, no, but
You
what
asked
is?
me if the Bible was appropriate for children.
Well, I think
I
we're talking
don't
about
think the
children's
Bible.
libraries and public schools. So what I'm saying is, should the Bible be in children's libraries and public schools? And if the answer to that is yes, then that opens the door for a lot of other things, correct?
First off, again, I'm going to say that the question you asked was, is it appropriate for children? You didn't ask me if it's appropriate for library.
Well, I thought we were talking about
I
libraries,
think
so I thought it just was implied.
no, I answered the question. So
Sure, yeah.
there is, I do believe there's a difference that the library is a public library, so it has the responsibility of you know being a public, whether it's in the school, it's not totally public in that sense. Uh, if the Bible is allowed in the library, then also, especially in a public world, then meaning funded by by government funding, then other religious documents and texts should also be there. That was my point there.
You'd say no, Ed, to having the Bible in a public library? Why would you? I'm curious.
And I wouldn't necessarily disagree with that either.
Oh, really?
know,
You don't? So to me, it's just, like, okay, well, I mean, in my elementary school library, there were Norse mythology and Greek and Roman mythology, and there is some stuff
Right.
in there too, right? Like that you're just like, what? Right? It's not, I mean, it was an elementary library. Like, it wasn't.
Right. I remember in the 6th grade studying Greek mythology and Roman mythology. Yeah, those
So
are
should we take that
very
out too? I
important.
mean, to me, the Bible is very much in line with those kind of things.
Right. I understand what you're saying there. And my point is that those and the Bible also, but also the Quran and other religious texts, have had a huge influence on culture, society, and the even the way that we establish laws and stuff, the laws that we establish and all of that. But one of the challenges with the Bible being in the schools is which Bible are you putting in?
Well,
Because
multiple, right? Multiple?
right, so
Wouldn't the answer be
Protestants,
multiple? I guess unless you have finite space.
right? Well, if we're
But why
talking
wouldn't you
about
have
finite
multiple
space,
for
we
the?
care
We're
about it.
talking about education, learning. Like if you want to
Right,
study the
but
differences between the Bibles and
so the
uh,
most popular Bible in English is the New International Version. It is
mhm,
a very biased version.
right.
It was designed to promote certain agendas and certain ideas about a scripture. And so choices they made in translation were intended to be biased. So do you do that one, or do you put the King James where nobody reads because it's not in that language anymore? Do you put a children's Bible, which is really stories that are sweet and all of that, or do you put multiple translations? Then is it the Catholic version of the Bible, so you include certain books in that you don't include do you include the Apocrypha? So my point is that by choosing to do that, just like putting the Ten Commandments in all the classrooms,
Well, to me, that's
they
two
say
different things. Now, that's hold on. Putting the Ten Commandments in, to me, as like a display at a school is much different than having Bibles or any mythology book or any religious book in
right,
libraries for the
but
basis of academic study.
but but the choices you make in putting those things up, whether it's the document of the Ten Commandments, which there are at least three different versions of the Ten Commandments that different religions use. The Jewish faith would have different Ten Commandments. There's a whole chart that I've seen, and it's a huge chart, and there's way more than three. It kind of boils down to three. So the Jewish faith tends to have a particular 10 that they choose. The Catholic faith has, that part of Christianity has a 10 that they use, and then the Protestants have 10 that we use. And within that, there are variations of how people interpret what those commandments are. And the same is true with translations of the Bible. They have a tendency to, and also which books are included and what order they're in and all that. By doing that, the institution is choosing which religion to promote. That was my point of all that.
Right, but if you have every book, like if you have multiple versions of the Bible, you've got the Quran, you've got like Shinto tales, you've got Buddha stuff.
George
like
Carlin might be a good idea.
Right, I'm just saying you've got several there just for the basis of studying religion in an academic way.
Yeah, I hear your point. I do, and I'm not arguing with you.
And listen, as a fourth grader, I wasn't really like going to look at Greek myths in an academic way. I just thought the stories were neat.
Right.
But that's
exactly
still academia, right? Like that's still, the pursuit of knowledge.
Yes.
At one point it was a religion though, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, my sister would tell you that just like you're saying with Greek, she used to love Greek mythology. We had a cat named Mithra. But like you, it was about the stories. And the same is true. She said, I read the Bible because I needed to know what these people were talking about. And that's, that's part of being a part of society. I'm not arguing with you that it shouldn't be there. I'm saying that, just be aware that there are biases.
Well, I mean, yeah.
One.
Well, of course, you don't want to say, hey,
most people,
just having the book there doesn't mean this is a representation of the truth. It's just these are words. We have them in a library. That
right.
To me, that's right. I don't know. You made me want to watch the George Carlin 10 Commandments. Thank goodness we're not getting paid for any of this, because this would be copyright written, I guess.
That's right.
That's right. Copyright struck. In fourth grade, we were starting sex education, I believe. So they literally gave us those books.
Yeah, he went to a real school.
Well, folks, here's something else I got a problem with. The 10 Commandments. Here's my problem. Why are there 10? You don't need 10. I think the list of commandments was deliberately and artificially inflated to get it up to 10. It's a padded list. Here's what they did. About 5,000 years ago, a bunch of religious and political hustlers got together to try to figure out how to...
I'm in trouble with my internet or something.
Yeah.
What? Let's see what program I got that's probably running too hot. I don't know.
Control people, how to keep them in line. They knew people were basically stupid and would believe anything they were told, so they announced that God had given them some commandments. Up on a mountain, when no one was around, God had given them the 10 Commandments. But let me ask you this. When they were sitting around making this shit up, why did they pick 10? Why 10? Why not 9 or 11? I'll tell you why. Because 10 sounds official. 10 sounds important. They knew if it was 11, people wouldn't take it seriously. So what, are you kidding me? The 11 Commandments? Get the fuck out of here. But 10 sounds important. 10 is the basis for the decimal system. It's a decade. It's a psychologically satisfying number. The top 10, the 10 most wanted, the 10 best dressed. So having 10 commandments
I guess it
was
is,
really a marketing decision. And to me, it's clearly a bullshit list. It's a political document artificially inflated to sell better. I'm going to show you how you could reduce the number of commandments and come up with a list that's a little more workable and logical. We're going to start with the first 3, and I'll use the Roman Catholic version because those are the ones I was taught as a little boy. I am the Lord thy God. Thou shalt not have strange gods before me. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Thou shalt keep holy the Sabbath. Right off the bat, the first 3, pure bullshit. Sabbath day, Lord's name, strange gods. Spooky language. Spooky language. designed to scare and control primitive people. In no way does superstitious nonsense like this apply to the lives of intelligent, civilized humans in the 21st century. You throw out the first 3 commandments, you're down to 7. Next, honor thy father and mother. Obedience, respect for authority. Just another name for controlling people. The truth is, obedience and respect should not be automatic. They should be earned. They should be based on the parent's performance. Parents' performance. All right? Some parents deserve respect. Most of them don't. Period. You're down to 6. Now, in the interest of logic, something religion is very uncomfortable with, we're going to jump around the list a little bit. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness. Stealing and lying. Well, actually, these two both prohibit the same kind of behavior. Dishonesty, stealing, and lying. So you don't need 2 of them. Instead, you combine them and you call it thou shalt not be dishonest. And suddenly, you're down to 5. And as long as we're combining, I have 2 others that belong together. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Once again, these 2 prohibit the same kind of behavior. In this case,
those 2 together.
Infidelity. The difference is coveting takes place
Protestants
in the mind.
did.
And I don't think you should outlaw fantasizing about someone else's wife. Otherwise, what's a guy going to think about when he's waxing his carrot?
Oh, George.
But marital fidelity is a good idea, so we're going to keep the idea and call this one, thou shalt not be unfaithful. And suddenly, we're down to 4. But when you think about it, honesty and fidelity are really part of the same overall value. So in truth, you could combine the 2 honesty commandments with the 2 fidelity commandments and give them simpler language, positive language instead of negative, and call the whole thing, thou shalt always be honest and faithful, and we're down to 3. Thou shalt, they're going away fast. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. This one is just plain fucking stupid. Coveting your neighbor's goods is what keeps the economy going.
I forgot that line.
Keeping up with the
Joneses.
Joneses.
A vibrator that plays "Oh Come All Ye Faithful." You want to get one too. Coveting creates jobs. Leave it alone. You throw out coveting and you're down to 2 now, the big honesty and fidelity commandment, and the one we haven't talked about yet, thou shalt not kill, murder, the 5th commandment. But when you think about it, religion has never really had a big problem with murder. Not really. More people have been killed in the name of God than for any other reason. All you have to do, all you have to do is look at Northern Ireland, the Middle East, Kashmir, the Inquisition, the Crusades, and the World Trade Center to see how seriously the religious folks take thou shalt not kill. The more devout they are, the more they see murder as being negotiable. It's negotiable.
Is what they say.
You know?
You got to negotiate
It depends.
with the text.
It
That's right.
depends on
We
who's
all
doing
do
the
it.
killing and who's getting killed.
That's right. You know, the more religious you are, the more you've negotiated that thou shalt not kill.
Yeah, I've heard people say, one of the negotiations I've heard in recent years was, well, it says you shall not kill. You shouldn't kill, but really the word is murder. It's not really kill. So therefore, it only means this one particular way.
We'd be in a rough place if we couldn't kill. Like, because we need to eat.
Yeah, and of course the implication is you shall not kill.
Another human, but I'm just saying, like,
For
kill
these
it.
people, it's that.
But the way of the world is, if you want to survive, you got to kill something.
Correct.
It's rough out there, Billy.
So, with all of this in mind, I leave
hold
you
on.
with my...
And it's one of the things that was interesting about the fact that he used the Catholic version, and I think a lot of Protestants, if they were actually watching this, would have gone, "Oh, well, that's different than what I'm used to," and it is. And that was my point about all of that in the first place. Is by choosing which 10 commandments you put up, you've made a choice about which religion you're promoting, which therefore means, yes, it is about promoting religion.
Right. Now you said, I didn't realize there were that many discrepancies in the 10 Commandments.
Yes, there's a number. Each, there's quite a bit. Just Google 10 Commandments, go to images, and look at the pictures of what the 10 Commandments are, and you will see a number of different variations on that just from that alone.
Images, you say?
Yeah, and just look at them, and you will find
Okay.
that they're not all the same.
All right, so let's see. Let's do this one. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make idols. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath to keep it holy.
So let me stop you. So
Father,
if
Mother.
you were paying attention to what George Carlin did, those four were just the first three.
Well, the first three he combined them all, and then really the first four he said he went to the fourth one. He said, "Well, that one's kind of the same too." And then he even went to
But
the
no,
further-
I mean what he said was the first three are this, and those three that he said they were before he cut them down. The last one was what you just read as number 4.
Yeah, but he eventually put them all together as a
Yeah, I get that, but the original that he was starting with is different than the one you're looking at right now.
Yeah. So like if we were to look at this one, this one's pretty much the same, right?
Right.
Okay. This one is a little bit more.
That's correct. And look at number 3.
Yeah, it's different.
Number 3 is the Sabbath, and number 4, which was Sabbath on the purple one, is honor your father and mother.
So why are they?
So in just pulling up 2, you've already got different versions of the 10 Commandments.
So, is there one that would be more accurate than the other?
No, because there's not just 10 laws in the 10 Commandments. There's about 13 or so.
So when okay, so when George Carlin was saying they had to make it 10, there really was some that were like 13.
Well, so in there, the commandments come out in they're not even called that in some places, but they exist in the Bible in different places. In Exodus and Deuteronomy, in particular, I think there's one in Leviticus.
But
Only
the stone
one of those
tablets
refers to it as,
themselves.
yeah, well, there's no actual stone tablets.
Yeah, but it didn't. I guess it didn't detail what was on the stone tablets. Am I losing it?
Well, the story says that, but there weren't actually stone tablets. What I was saying.
Yeah, sure.
So there's no stone tablets for us to go back to and say, "Hey,
I
what
guess
does it
what
really
I'm
say?"
curious is like, why would they get the numbers messed up?
Because
It wasn't
in
written.
one place, you want the answer?
Yes.
In one place, it does refer to the Decalogue and refers to, that means 10 laws, basically.
Okay.
So it refers to 10, but it doesn't. It isn't really 10 in any of those places. They're kind of like the first one on this one is, "I'm the Lord your God. Thou shalt not have strange gods before me." That's the one he read. "You shall not take the name of the Lord in vain, and you keep the Lord's Day Sabbath." Where's the idol?
Well, 2 was.
See what I'm saying?
And the purple one 2 was not make idols.
Right. See, so
And
that's
3.
in there.
That's
but
what I'm saying. I guess what I didn't realize is that there wasn't.
most people do not realize that.
Well, yeah, but I just didn't realize that. I didn't realize that the numbers could be mixed and matched.
Yeah, and it's more about them doing exactly what George Carlin was doing. So in some,
Is there really 2 places where there's 10 commandments? I didn't realize there were 2 places.
Yeah, they're in Leviticus. I mean, in Exodus and Deuteronomy, and I think there's another version in Leviticus.
I guess what I'm saying is I never realized they were different. And
well, yeah, they are.
yeah, I get. Wow. Okay. Well, we're here to learn. All right, let's finish the jokes with George. Where is he at? Oh,
Same page, you just backspace.
That's right. I must have.
Thank you. The more they see murder as being negotiable, it's negotiable. You know? It depends. It depends. It depends on who's doing the killing and who's getting killed. So, with all of this in mind, I leave you with my revised list of the 2 commandments.
The 2
Thou shalt always be honest and faithful to the provider of thy nookie. And thou shalt try real hard not to kill anyone, unless, of course, they pray to a different invisible man from the one you pray to. 2 is all you need. Moses could have carried him down the hill in his fucking pocket. And if they had a list like that, I wouldn't mind those folks in Alabama putting it up on the courthouse wall. As long as they included one additional commandment, thou shalt keep thy religion to thyself. Thank you. Thank you.
What if you don't have one?
Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Which is what he was saying, is if you don't have one, you don't have to put up with it, right?
Right.
Yeah, I love George Carlin. Even as, he asks good questions. That's
He
one of the
does.
things I've always said about him. I've always felt that way. I used to feel that way more about Bill Maher than Bill Maher loses me occasionally.
Bill Maher loses me all the time now. I was
Yeah.
very much in for a while, but I don't know. His performances have not impressed me lately, I suppose.
Yeah. His I don't know entirely what it is. I know part of it is I don't know, he's trying to fit in with more people.
He's trying to fit in, and it just feels, you know. I don't
And
know what to say more
CNN's
about
been
that.
showing him on their channel. I'm like, why are we doing a crossover with Bill Maher on
Mhm.
CNN? I don't get that.
All right, so I feel like
No,
to appease Ed here, let's see. Let's do some web surfing here, and I'll tell you what. Let's go back to the old Copilot. Let's do that again, and let's just have a little quick conversation with Copilot, and let's ask it some questions.
By the way, while you're doing that, there were the 2 guys that was it the Wilsons? They're not the guys in Texas, though. That's a different. I mean, they may be in Texas, but that's not who he was talking about. It's interesting. It's a lot of times a group of brothers.
There it is. Okay. All right.
I don't know
So
if we don't see what you're doing.
can you not see? Oh, you can't see this.
No.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get this.
We're on your YouTube Premium page.
That's right. Let's see if I can change it over. So let's change it to. There we go. All right, so we're gonna ask some. Let's do the. Let's have it think a little deeper.
Hey, Roberto.
The left wing.
No, it's not because he's not a socialist.
How do they compare to right wing ones? I'm just curious. I've never asked this, so we'll see.
You've stumped Copilot.
No, this is the think deeper. All right, so yeah, left-leaning think tanks typically prioritize reducing economic inequality, strengthening the social safety net, advancing labor rights, and addressing climate change. Center for American Progress bills itself as progressive and seeks to drive democratic policy across economy, healthcare, climate, national security, and more. Another one, this one's more like a Bernie Sanders. The Economic Policy Institute, conducts research on wages, labor law, and collective bargaining to bolster union power and living standards. Then we got right of center, free market solutions, deregulation, tax privatization, and muscular foreign policy. The Heritage Foundation, are we consider them just right of center?
They're certainly right of center.
I mean, they're right of it, but I mean, not just right of center. I mean, not just. I'd say, with Project 2025 and the authoritarianism that they've got going on.
Yeah.
What's a good question for us, Ed? Give us a question to ask the co-pilot. What do you think, Billy? What should we ask about think tanks? Anything?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. The question to ask there.
Yeah.
I was just reading the conservative think tanks lean heavily on model legislation, often via ALEC at the state level. Is that the group that kind of shares their legislation around different states? Rapid media deployment and deep bench of former officials placed into Republican administrations. You mean deep state? Heritage Project 2025 and AEI's presidential transition playbooks epitomize this strategy.
You sent me a list. Where did you send me a list?
He says he sent it to you in Messenger, I think.
Oh.
That was for 10 Commandments, though.
Oh, yeah.
Unless he's referring to something earlier.
Well, we have. I think us playing around with Copilot and asking this kind of stuff has shown us that the show is over. Probably don't have a whole lot much more to talk about. I just, for me, I think I want to just finish this up and just say, look, follow the money when it comes to this kind of stuff. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
So on the 10 Commandments thing, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, I just got a purple couch on my screen. So on the 10 Commandments thing, Deuteronomy's version, Moses convened all of Israel and said to them, and there's a whole list, and it's a very long thing. The first one is, Hear, O Israel, the statutes and ordinances that I'm addressing. I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. You could interpret that as one or two, depending on the Jewish people would interpret that as two.
The Jewish people would interpret that as two?
Yeah, the I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God is a separate commandment from having no other gods. You shall not make for yourself an idol, and then it goes into detail. In that sentence, it also says, you shall not bow down to them, just worshiping an idol still. Then way further down, showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. That's something he said in that. And so then it's, you shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Next, it's observe a Sabbath day, keep it holy. Describes what that is, and the seventh day stuff. And then later, it's remember you were a slave. That's not a commandment, of course. Still talking about. So that's like 7-8 verses that are talking about the Sabbath. Then it's honor your father and your mother. Then it's you shall not murder. The footnote says, or kill, by the way. Neither shall you commit adultery, neither shall you steal, neither shall you bear false witness against your neighbor, neither shall you covet your neighbor's wife, neither shall you desire your neighbor's house or field or male or female slaves or oxen. And so if you counted up what I just read to you, which I'm sure you were doing, it's more than 10.
Yeah, did you send it on, so it's more than 10. Did you send it on
9 M40s.
Oh, okay. I see where you did. So, you're talking about this one?
Put it back! Put the Ten Commandments back! You ain't taking my Ten Commandments!
I got
You ain't
mad.
taking my Bible! And you ain't touching my faith!
Oh, person you're watching. It isn't showing up here, of course.
Oh, sorry. I have to re-show this to you. Hold on. I don't. There we go. Yeah, this guy, he was pretty mad.
Put it back! Put the Ten Commandments back! You ain't taking my Ten Commandments! You ain't taking my Bible! And you ain't touching my faith!
Christians love them some Ten Commandments. They're always trying to hang them in courthouses all across America, and they'll almost always do it by showing these twin stone tablets with the rules etched on them. I'm going to show you that Christians don't even understand their own religion, and in this case, the Ten Commandments.
Religion, Billy?
No, I'm not talking about how they consistently violate the ones they do try to.
Do we lose you again?
You can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
I don't know where my video went. I don't know if I did something there or not. I just unplugged my headphones.
Oh, well,
'Cause
they
they
might
were
have done
charging,
something weird.
Yeah, I'm still here.
No graven images, don't kill, don't steal, keep the Sabbath day holy, don't covet thy neighbor's goods, and don't covet their asses. Their asses. I'm not talking about those rules. I'm talking about the Ten Commandments. Now you may say, but aren't those 10 Commandments? Get out your Bibles, folks. Here's the old theme music.
The Holy Bible, the King James Version. The second book of Moses, called Exodus.
Before we get started, I want us all to agree on a definition of the 10 Commandments. I think every Christian would agree that the 10 Commandments are defined as laws given to Moses by Yahweh, written on stone tablets. They are called the Ten Commandments in the Bible. Fair enough? Now let's turn to the Ten Commandments story.
They're not called that in the Bible.
What's that, Billy?
Point taken.
Billy, oh, did I lose you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you. You said point taken. I didn't know. You had a
No, I
comment.
was saying they're not actually called that in the Bible.
Moses leads his people out of Egypt, and they end up in the desert of Sinai. Yahweh summons Moses up to the top of Mount Sinai, and he says he has some rules for the Israelites. Moses then goes down, gets everyone together, and we hear for the first time the rules from Yahweh. It's the standard stuff we all know. All of this occurs in Exodus 20. If you read it, you'll see that Yahweh is not saying,
Number 1, no other gods. Number 2, no graven images.
It's just
That's got me
Some of
watching
these
a video.
rules
Got
spread
us watching a
across
video
several
from
passages.
an
Keep in
account with
mind that these are
187
spoken.
subscribers.
They aren't written down. So let's go back to our rules.
It's pretty fun.
The first part is satisfied, but the second and the third are not. So by definition, these are not the Ten Commandments. We have to get stone tablets at some point, and it's not until a bit later that we actually do get them. Now Yahweh summons Moses back up to the top of Mount Sinai, and then it's there. Okay, I'll tell you what. Let's let Alexander Scorby tell it.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Come up to me into the mount, and be there. And I will give thee tables of stone, and a law, and commandments which I have written, that thou mayest teach them. And Moses went up into the mount, And Moses was in the mount 40 days and 40 nights.
Meanwhile,
the Israelites back down at the bottom are getting worried. Moses,
I would say after
like a
40
deadbeat
days.
father, has been gone for over a month. And like small-minded people usually are, these people at the bottom of the hill needed to worship something really bad.
And when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down out of the mount, the people gathered themselves together unto Aaron, and said unto him, Up, make us gods which shall go before us. For as for this Moses, the man that brought us up out of the land of Egypt, we wot not what is become of him. And Aaron said unto them, Break off the golden earrings which are in the ears of your wives, of your sons, and of your daughters, and bring them unto me.
So they build the golden calf, and they start dancing and partying like it's 1999 BC.
Anything that had gold.
Meanwhile,
that's a lot of earrings, and like for that little picture they had even there of that.
It's a lot of people.
I guess that's still, to make even that much, that's a lot of earrings.
Yes.
BC.
Meanwhile,
and the Lord said unto Moses, Go, get thee down, for thy people which thou broughtest out of the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. And Moses turned
There's a bigger one.
and went down from the land of Egypt have corrupted themselves. And Moses turned and went down from the mount, and the 2 tables of the testimony were in his hand. And the tables were the work of God, and the writing was the writing of God, graven upon the tables. And it came to pass, as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing. And Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands, and brake them beneath the mount.
We're not told exactly what is on these tablets. But Moses, like a little whiny child, he breaks the stone tablets that were written by God himself. So what does Moses do next?
That is something to be said, right? Like, the supreme being of all gave you writing on stone, and you smashed it.
He's frustrated.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you.
Next, does he say, oh crap? Or does he say, quick, Aaron, give me some glue? Or does he express any regret for not setting these things down gently? I mean, these suckers were made of heavy rock. They were like tombstones. He had to really slam these puppies down hard. So does he dwell on losing the work that Yahweh spent 40 days and nights cranking out? No. He takes some followers and he orders them to kill their families.
Put every man his sword by his side, and go in and out from gate to gate throughout the camp, and slay every man his brother, and every man his companion, and every man his neighbor.
Which you know, thou shalt not murder.
And the children of Levi did according to the word of Moses, and there fell of the people that day about 3,000 men.
Well, wait a minute. Didn't God just say that thou shalt not kill? Honor thy neighbor, honor thy mother, and honor thy father. Do graven idols really take precedent over all the others? Somebody better tell the Catholics. But let's stay on track. These aren't the 10 Commandments either. The first and second rules are satisfied, but the tablets were broken and nobody knew what was on them. And they still haven't been called the 10 Commandments yet. So several chapters go by, and man is still without the 10 Commandments. But Yahweh himself said that those tablets were the most important thing ever. They were basically mankind's instruction book. So what are they going to do now? I mean, here they are in the desert, and they have no way
And the Lord said unto Moses, Hew thee 2 tables of stone like unto the first. And I will write upon these tables the words that were in the first tables, which thou breakest.
Oh, right on. God's going to write them again, and exactly like he did before Moses broke them. Sweet. And Yahweh gives Moses the new laws, and they are put into stone tablets.
Observe thou that which I command thee this day. For thou shalt worship no other God. For the Lord, whose name is jealous, is a jealous God.
Okay.
That one always was weird to me, that God is jealous.
Yeah.
Thou shalt make thee no molten gods.
Right, graven images.
The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep.
What?
7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, as I commanded thee, in the time of the month Abib, for in the month Abib thou camest out from Egypt.
What?
All that openeth the matrix is mine,
What?
and every firstling among thy cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is male. 6 days thou shalt work, but on the 7th day thou shalt rest.
Okay, I remember that one.
And thou shalt observe the feast of weeks,
The festival, what?
of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. Thrice in the year shall all your men children appear before the Lord God, the God of Israel. Thou shalt not offer the blood of my sacrifice with leaven.
What does that mean?
The first of the first fruits of thy land thou shalt bring unto the house of the Lord thy God.
Huh?
Thou shalt not see the kid in his mother's milk.
Oh my God.
So this is accurate. I don't remember this.
He is correct. Those are there. I'm trying to go, and they're spread out a little bit.
Boiling a goat? Who would do such a thing?
And the Lord said unto Moses, Write thou these words, for after the tenor of these words I have made a covenant with thee and with Israel. And he was there with the Lord 40 days and 40 nights. He did neither eat bread nor drink water. And he wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments.
Well, there you go. Don't boil a goat.
So there we are, folks. The 10 Commandments that's specifically named and listed in the Bible. The only stone tablets that made it. You realize, don't you, that these are the commandments that made it into the Ark of the Covenant? Indiana Jones did all that work to recover these. No wonder this is what happened to the Nazis when they actually saw what was inside.
Put it back! Put the 10 Commandments back! You ain't
This is a
taking
fun
my
video.
10 Commandments, you ain't taking my Bible, and you ain't touching my faith! Get your hands off our God! You bunch of God haters! Put it back!
Okay, all right. Well, that was
Yeah,
fun.
but the one thing he left out is that there is another version in Deuteronomy that is more like the first one. But the way these are presented in the text, it doesn't start out and say, he said that it says they're the 10 Commandments at some point. He was implied that earlier. But it says, I hereby make a covenant before all your people. I will perform marvels such as have not been performed in all the earth. Sound like anybody, you know? And all the people among whom you shall live shall see the work of the Lord, for it is an awesome thing that I will do. Observe what I command. And then he says, I'm going to drive out all the people and all that kind of. So there's nowhere in this that says that this is the 10 Commandments.
Like those are the 10 Commandments. Yeah, sure. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's just making a point that it's like
he's right. The point he's making is right. I'm just saying that he's a little misleading in that by implicit. But the chapter 34 that last part is in, I wouldn't normally say, oh, these headings that are in your Bible, they're not really from the scripture. Moses makes new tablets is what the description is there. And so, I'm going to fix the ones that were broken. But in Deuteronomy, which is further down in the storyline, the 10 Commandments that we normally would think of are there. But again, there's not just 10. So
yeah. Well, I mean, obviously those commandments. I guess maybe somewhere I might have heard of that. I don't know. Some of those sound pretty. I never heard the boiling of the goat.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I read about it and was learning about it a little bit more within this calendar year, and had not remembered that. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't remember that, and I never considered that. The 10 Commandments. So
sure,
but the point that he was making is
Like there was another
it's
place
sort
that
of
had
implied.
this. And this is the one
Yeah,
that
there-
said it
there-
had all the three things: the stone tablets, the 10 Commandments, the number 10.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Although I don't think the number 10, I still don't find the number 10 there. But anyway, it's very interesting.
Well, you're the one who said it. You're like, there's more than 10 commandments.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's why, like I said, the quick Google search that you did for images, you found you clicked on two and they were different.
Right.
What are the odds that the two you clicked on were different if everybody agrees on them?
Sure. I just, I don't know. I guess
And by the
I
way,
was
the
just,
reason my camera is pointed at a lampshade is because for some reason if I turn it around, it goes away. So I got a short.
well, it's a lovely lampshade, the green and the purple.
It is. It's a It's a fake Tiffany. It's made of printed material.
Right on. Well, Billy, I thank you for your expertise again. I learned that there are more than 10 commandments. That's interesting. And Ed has taught me that there were atheists on YouTube before Dark Matter 2525. All right.
Yes, there were.
I think that's a good place to end it on. We watched some George Carlin. We kind of got off that video kind of went by pretty quick. I could have picked a quicker, longer one, I guess. I had a couple of videos I was trying to choose from, but I was trying to be concise.
Well, considering our technical difficulties today,
it worked out pretty good.
Worked out, yeah.
Yeah.
I got up here and I had all kinds of, because of the power outage, I didn't realize that the outlet that I have was tripped, and so I got up here and I hadn't put my camera up yet, and I realized I had more to do to get ready. That's why I was so late getting there. But anyway,
it is what it is, man. All right, well, we will do this again next Tuesday. I have a very busy week, so I will probably be exhausted. Lots of singing in hot places this week. Sweaty.
Well,
It'll
enjoy
be a
the
sweat
heat.
fest. Yeah,
Enjoy the heat. I'm happy that summer is finally here.
Well, I guess.
We're going to see the Pirates on Friday night.
Hey.
And then I'm going to Columbus.
What's in Columbus?
Saturday. Le Creuset, which is they make things to cook in. They're having a big thing, and Carla's wanting to go to that. So.
Right on. Well, very good.
Go see the Pirates. Lose
Have
to the
fun
Mets.
watching the Pirates. Tell Carla I said hello, and we will do
All
this
right.
again next Tuesday. Y'all be easy now.
All right. Bye.